Hi, this is Joyce Rosemary Hill, and I want to take a few minutes to provide a brief overview of this part of the course. There are some key takeaways that you should focus on from the readings that will help you prepare for your work assignment. As a reminder, this part involves 2 weeks spanning from August 20th to September 2nd. The calendar shows a recommended schedule where you complete your readings and team activities during the weekdays, and then complete a class discussion, a private journal, and an individual case study between the weekdays. It is important that you understand that group assignments are asynchronous, which means they are not real time. Your interaction with other students in these assignments is through postings that you will submit and then check back on later. So you can start early on any of the assignments as long as you participate in the class discussion sometime during the scheduled period. And you are available to interact with your team by email and through a shared document during any team learning activity. Your reading assignment for this part is Yuckle chapters 1 through 4. The discussion will be a continuation of leadership versus management that you began in the Getting Started section. You will profile someone you know for the journal and then create recommended leadership practices in the team learning activity, which you will then apply to the case study located in the text on page 78. Yuckle's definition of leadership encompasses 3 elements. The first is that it involves processes of influence and facilitation. The second is that it involves a leader and followers. However, neither the leader nor the follower must be in the same organization. What brings them together is one or more shared objectives, which is the third element. So with this definition, the leadership situation can take on many forms that include formal or informal relations between leader and followers, any variety of organizational types, as well as positive or negative purposes in their collective efforts. Our study over the next 6 weeks is about the underlying processes involved and how situations impact the effectiveness of leadership. So during the course duration, we will look at characteristics of the leader and the follower as well as the situation. We will also have to think about what we mean when we say effective leadership. Yuckle offers the following. What is important here is that performance of the group is the key indicator. The other indicators may include attitudes and perceptions, quality, and so on. So while organizational performance is an imperative, many organizations will measure other key indicators. For example, they will measure not only the outcomes or the results, but also the behaviors or actions taken by the leader and the followers to achieve those results. These are things that we will touch on throughout this course. In the beginning of this course, you shared your opinion on whether leadership and management are the same or not. I want you to continue this dialogue after you've read the first 4 chapters of the textbook and after you've watched this presentation. Consider this question. Are managerial activities, as defined by Yuckle, related to leadership? The answer may lie in the way we look at leadership, the way we conceptualize it. In Figure 1.3, Yuckle highlights different ways of conceptualizing leadership. By conceptualizing, we mean the framework we use in examining a leadership situation. So for example, we could look at just the individual leader and his or her characteristics and behaviors to understand how these affect leadership. Or we could use a didactic approach where we examine leadership in the context of the relation between 2 people, the leader and the follower. We might take this approach in examining leadership in the context of a larger group or of more than one follower or even in a large organization. It is important that you understand that how we conceptualize leadership is the framework needed in determining the effectiveness of leadership. As an organizational development consultant, I assist organizations in the development of leaders to help them improve on its organizational performance. So consider this. How might a consultant integrate this conceptualization of leadership into your organization And will this approach be sufficient to work within your organization? Historically, the study of leadership began with just the leader. Today we know that it's a much more complex study involving all elements in the working definition that we are using: influence, organization, and shared objectives. But the historical perspective is an important one. There are three historical studies or models that were developed in the 50s and 60s that related to leader behavior: the Ohio State Leadership Studies, the University of Michigan Leadership Studies, a university that is near and dear to my heart, and the Blake-Mouton Managerial Grid. What is common among these three approaches is the concept that leadership behavior can be classified into two meta-categories: task orientation and relations orientation. Task orientation is essentially focused on the mission, the means to achieve the end, while relations orientation is a focus on followers, the level of trust that is built between the leader and the followers. Blake and Mouton measured a leader's orientation at a given point in time through a survey instrument. The results of the survey showed the level of a leader's orientations on a scale of 1 to 9. So a 5-5 leader means the leader has equal and moderate task and relations orientations. Blake and Mouton call these orientations concern for production and concern for people. The model suggests because a 9-9 leader is strong in both orientations and generally will use a team management approach, he or she will be more effective than a 9-1 leader, who will typically demonstrate concern for production but is often weak in his or her concern for people. However, Yeckel points out that the research in leader behavior is mixed on questions like this. According to Yeckel, researchers had inconsistent results in correlating these specific or discrete behaviors with effective leadership. Later, by looking at patterns of behaviors, researchers found some correlation with effective leadership, which means we can draw on some conclusions, but not all, suggested from the various studies. Still later, researchers began looking at other variables. So in this case, concerning leadership behavioral theories, what are the criticisms that we should be aware of? Answering this question is extremely important to our study of leadership. Whenever you use any theory or leadership model, you should understand its strengths, limitations, and/or criticisms. Generally, all of these theories, approaches, and models are useful in helping us understand a leadership situation, but they don't always explain why things work the way they do. I want you to recognize this in your assignments and be comfortable in challenging any specific theory. Yeckel cites weaknesses in behavior research, such as researcher bias in survey instruments. There is a tendency to look for simple answers. However, leadership is just much more complex. This approach involving only two meta-categories is essentially a simple two-dimensional view of leadership. The inconsistency in the research results imply that leadership behavior and its influence is much more complicated. Because researchers conceptualize leadership as being all about the leader, they miss opportunities to examine other important variables linked to other environmental considerations. Yeckel expanded the orientations to include change management, and we will find later in the course that fellowship, situation, and other environmental considerations affect leadership. Yeckel also points out that trying to correlate specific behaviors with effectiveness is incredibly difficult, but there is value in looking at leaders' behaviors as we view the patterns of behaviors rather than a singular behavior or action. He explains that patterns of behavior actually correlate with effective leadership, which is why we will spend time in this part of the course to more fully explore perspectives on effective leadership behavior. To accomplish this, I recommend that you focus on Table 3-3 on page 66 and read pages 68 through 75. Yeckel provides specific tasks, relations, and change behaviors in a simple taxonomy. Then in subsequent tables, starting with Table 3-5, he provides a few patterns of behaviors that can have a positive influence on leadership effectiveness. In your assignments, I will refer to Table 3-3 know that these other tables, as shown on this slide, provide support to the taxonomy as well. Through the learning activities in this part of the course, you will have the opportunity to explore leader behaviors in the context of leader action. You will intuitively grasp the benefits of certain leader behaviors and actions based on what we know from the research and your own personal experience. So we can immediately start this process of behavior patterns by examining decision-making, which is an important leadership function. Chapter 4 of YUCC will focus on specific behaviors and processes for decision-making, and these include participative leadership, delegation, and empowerment. But just like the study of leader behavior theories in general, it is important to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the underlying research in decision-making in order to better apply the theory to leadership decision-making situations. Let's start with participative leadership.